"We're not leaving until we've had a word with you," a firm voice declared, slicing through the celebratory chatter. Jason, his smile faltering, turned to see 3 young boys standing defiantly. The one who spoke with a determined glint in his eyes continued, "Why don't you look at our faces? Maybe you'll get a clue why we're here." Confusion clouded Jason's face as he scanned the unfamiliar children. This was his engagement party. What could they possibly want? The most serious-looking of the trio, a boy with long, dark hair, stepped forward, his small hand clutching an envelope. "We just want you to know," his young voice rang out surprisingly steady. "All 3 of us are your children. You're our dad." A wave of gasps rippled through the stunned guests. Jason's eyes widened, fixated on the boy. "Don't joke like that, kid." "That's a serious accusation." He managed his voice barely a whisper. The boy simply held up the envelope. "We brought DNA test results to prove we're telling the truth. Jason's engagement party has been shattered by this unbelievable claim, and the fallout is just beginning. If you're on the edge of your seat, wondering what those DNA tests will reveal, make sure to follow this story and share your immediate theories in the comments below. Could it really be true? The chandeliers of the St. Regis ballroom dripped crystals, like frozen tears of joy, each one reflecting the glittering assembly below. It was a night sculpted from dreams and limitless wealth, the engagement party of the city's most enigmatic billionaire and his radiant fiancée. Laughter, as effervescent as the champagne, filled the air, a symphony accompanying the clinking of glasses and the murmur of society's elite. The billionaire, a man who commanded boardrooms with the same ease he now held, his fiancée's hand surveyed the scene. A rare, almost boyish smile softened the usually stern lines of his handsome face. Tonight, the intricate web of his global enterprises, the relentless pressure of his empire, felt 1,000,000 miles away. Here, cocooned in warmth and adoration, was his future, his peace. He leaned in his voice, a low murmur against her ear. "Happy, my love," his fiancée, a vision in emerald silk that matched the envious glint in some of the guests' eyes, turned to him, her own eyes sparkling brighter than any diamond in the room. Beyond happy, she breathed her hand, tightening in his. "This is perfect," and it was, until it wasn't. A sudden hush, a ripple of unease started near the grand ballroom entrance. Heads began to turn, not with polite curiosity, but with a startled, almost scandalized focus. The billionaire's smile faltered a shadow, momentarily eclipsing his joy. He followed the collective gaze. Standing just inside the ornate doorway, looking remarkably out of place amidst the sea of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos, were 3 small boys, triplets, no older than 7 or 8. One sported a neat, no-nonsense buzz cut, his stance surprisingly defiant. Another, with a mop of unruly curly hair, scanned the room with wide, observant eyes. The third, his expression unnervingly serious for his tender years, clutched a large, slightly crumpled manila envelope to his chest. A collective gasp, soft but audible, swept through the room. Before any liveried attendant could intercept them, the buzz-cut boy stepped forward, his small voice cutting through the opulent silence with shocking clarity. "Good evening, everyone. Sorry to interrupt your fancy party," he announced, his tone a peculiar mix of childish treble and grown-up resolve. "But we're here to stop this engagement." The billionaire froze. The warmth in his chest turned to a sudden icy dread. He released his fiancée's hand, his expression hardening into a mask of disbelief and controlled fury. Around them, the whispers started quiet at first, then buzzing like a disturbed hive. "What is the meaning of this?" He managed his voice, dangerously low, as he began to stride towards the small intruders. His fiancée watched her face, a canvas of confusion, a delicate frown creasing her brow. "Hey, kids," the billionaire said, his voice tight with forced composure, though a vein throbbed at his temple. He stopped a few feet from them, towering over the trio. "This is a private party. For adults. You shouldn't be here, and I really don't want anything or anyone ruining this very special day." He tried to sound firm, authoritative, the way he did when an ill-prepared executive presented a flawed proposal. The curly-haired boy, undeterred, tilted his head. "We're not leaving until we've had a word with you," he said, his emphasis clear. "And maybe if you looked at our faces properly, you'd get a clue why we're crashing your, what did he call it, fancy party." He nudged the buzz-cut boy, who grinned. One particularly ostentatious guest, a woman dripping in jewels, and a feathered fascinator that seemed to have a life of its own, let out a small theatrical squeak. Triplets. At his engagement, oh the scandal, she whispered a little too loudly to her companion, her eyes wide with delighted horror. The billionaire's jaw tightened. He did look, truly looked at them, then searching their small, determined faces for some explanation, some sign that this was all an elaborate, tasteless prank. Confusion warred with a rising, inexplicable anxiety. Why were they here? They looked so earnest. It was the third child, the serious-looking one, with the longish dark hair that fell over his forehead, who stepped forward, then his gaze unnervingly direct. He held up the manila envelope. "We just want you to know," he said, his voice steady, devoid of any childish hesitation, "that all three of us are your children. You're our dad." The buzzing of whispers erupted into a cacophony of shocked murmurs. Gasps echoed. Champagne flutes were stilled midway to lips. The billionaire's eyes widened disbelief, battling a dawning, horrifying flicker of something. Recognition impossible. "Don't be ridiculous, kid." He snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. He shook his head, a humorless laugh escaping him. "That's a very serious accusation, a very unfunny joke." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I can assure you I haven't. I mean, it's impossible." The serious boy didn't flinch. "We wouldn't dare come all this way just to mess around, mister," he stated calmly. "And this isn't a joke." He waved the manila envelope with a gravity that was almost comical given his size. "We brought something. Proof. In case you didn't believe us." The billionaire stared at the envelope, then back at the boy's unblinking eyes. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, suffocating silence that had fallen over the ballroom. His fiancée had moved to stand slightly behind him, her hand on his arm. Her touch, usually a comfort, now felt like a brand. He could feel her trembling, or perhaps it was him. He looked from one small face to the next, a desperate search for a lie, for a sign of childish mischief. But all he saw was a resolute, almost painful sincerity. And then his gaze snagged on the curly-haired boy, who was now looking down, scuffing the toe of his worn sneaker on the polished marble floor. As the boy lifted his head again, a shy, fleeting smile touched his lips, a smile that mirrored with an unnerving, gut-wrenching precision a photograph of the billionaire himself, taken when he was just that age. A cold wave washed over him. The opulent ballroom, the glittering guests, the love of his life by his side. It all seemed to tilt to recede, as if he were looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. His fiancée's grip tightened on his arm. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a tremor he had never heard before. What is this? Tell me this isn't true." The mini-hook from the outline. "Chung Chaojen, Jenagan Jam Kwai Nai. We're here to stop this wedding." The actual dialogue used for the boy. Good evening, everyone. Sorry to interrupt your fancy party. But we're here to stop this engagement. Humor element, the curly-haired boy. And maybe if you looked at our faces properly, you'd get a clue why we're crashing your... What did he call it? Fancy party. Humor element guest. One particularly ostentatious guest, a woman dripping in jewels and a feathered fascinator that seemed to have a life of its own, let out a small theatrical squeak. Triplets. At his engagement, oh the scandal, mini-climax. The billionaire seeing the resemblance in the smile and his fiancée's whispered, trembling question. The envelope is also a mini-cliffhanger. The world, once a symphony of celebration, had shrunk to the deafening beat of the billionaire's own heart, and the tremor in his fiancée's whispered question, "Julian, what? What is this? Tell me this isn't true." His name on her lips, usually a melody, now sounded like an accusation. He wanted to look at her, to reassure her, to conjure a logical explanation that would wipe the dawning horror from her eyes. But his gaze was tethered to the three small figures before him, to the echo of that childish smile that had mirrored his own, and to the damning manila envelope held with such solemnity by the serious-looking boy. This is outrageous. The billionaire finally managed his voice, a ragged edge against the resumed, now more intense buzz of the stunned onlookers. He knew with a sickening certainty that this scene would be society fodder for months. Security. His voice cracked slightly on the word. Please escort these children out. But his fiancée's hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong, stopped him. No, Julian, she said, her voice low but firm, a new steel lacing its usual softness. She turned her gaze filled with a mixture of pain and unnerving scrutiny from him to the triplets. Let him show you the proof. The serious-looking boy, sensing a shift, stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the billionaire's. It's a DNA test result, he said, his voice clear and unwavering. Our mum said you might not remember or believe us. So she had this done. For all three of us. He extended the envelope. The billionaire felt a chill snake down his spine. DNA. The word itself was definitive, clinical, brutal. He didn't want to touch the envelope. It felt like a viper poised to strike. Yet under the combined weight of his fiancée's expectant gaze and the unwavering stares of the triplets, he slowly reached out his fingers, brushing the boy's small, surprisingly steady hand. Perhaps his fiancée suggested, her voice tight, we should discuss this somewhere more private. He nodded numbly. The ballroom felt like a fishbowl, every eye a lens, every whisper a judgment. He gestured curtly towards a heavy oak door at the side of the room, one that led to a small, sumptuously decorated anteroom, often used for discreet conversations. In here. The short walk felt like miles, the silence between him, his fiancée, and the trailing triplets, thick with unspoken accusations and shattering possibilities. The boys, surprisingly, were quiet, their earlier bravado replaced by a watchful, almost vulnerable air, now that the public confrontation had passed. Inside the anteroom, the sounds of the party muted to a distant thrum. The billionaire closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, as if to ward off the world. His fiancée stood near the center of the room, her arms crossed her posture, radiating a tension that mirrored his own. Well, she prompted, her gaze fixed on the envelope still clutched in his hand. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal. The paper inside felt flimsy, insignificant. Yet it held the power to dismantle his life. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the clinical text, the damning percentages, the names he didn't recognize next to his own, linked by irrefutable science. One for each boy. Each result a hammer blow. He read it once, twice, his mind refusing to process the stark black and white finality. A mistake. It had to be a mistake, a sophisticated, cruel forgery. But deep down, a forgotten memory, a hazy recollection of a brief, reckless period years ago, a time he'd thought long buried, began to surface, coiling in his gut like a serpent. The curly-haired boy, perhaps sensing the turmoil, spoke up, his voice softer now. "Mum always said you were smart," he offered, looking at the billionaire with an odd, almost hopeful expression. "She said you'd figure it out." He then turned to the fiancée, who was watching the billionaire's face intently, her own paling with every passing second. "Do you like hide-and-seek, miss?" the boy asked unexpectedly. She blinked, startled by the question. I suppose so," she stammered. "Our Dad," he said, gesturing towards the billionaire with a small thumb, "is very good at hiding. It took Mom almost 8 years to find him again for us." The words, innocent yet loaded, hung in the air. A choked sound escaped the fiancé. The billionaire flinched as if struck. He looked at her, then truly looked, and saw the raw pain, the burgeoning betrayal in her eyes. The foundation of their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. "Julian," her voice was a fragile whisper. "Is it true?" He couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at the papers in his hand, as if they were a foreign script he was desperately trying to decipher. I don't know, he lied, or perhaps wished. It could be a mistake. These things can be faked." But even as he said it, the image of that small, mirrored smile flashed in his mind. "A mistake," the buzzcut boy interjected, his earlier defiance returning. "Our mum cried a lot when she decided to send us. She wouldn't make a mistake about this." His lower lip trembled slightly, belying his tough stance. The serious-looking boy nodded. "She's been sick," he added quietly. She said we needed to know you. In case." His voice trailed off, the unspoken fear of a child echoing in the luxurious room. The billionaire's head snapped up. Sick, a new layer of complexity of guilt began to settle upon him. He had been so focused on the disruption, the scandal, his own shattered reality, that the unseen woman, the mother of these children, had been an abstraction. Now she was a person, ill desperate. His fiancée, however, seemed to latch onto his earlier words. "Then prove it's a mistake, Julian." She challenged, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "Right now, get your own test. Do something. Don't just stand there, looking like your world has ended, because mine feels like it already has." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over tracing paths down her perfect makeup. He looked at her, at the anguish marring her beautiful face, and a wave of protectiveness, of profound regret washed over him. He had done this. Somehow, someway, his past had risen up to shatter their present. Before he could respond, the curly-haired boy, perhaps misunderstanding the tension, or simply trying to lighten the mood in the only way he knew how, piped up. "If you do another test, can we get ice cream after Mum said doctors sometimes give treats?" The sheer, unadulterated childishness of the request juxtaposed against the monumental weight of the situation was so absurd it was almost painful. The billionaire felt a hysterical laugh bubble up, but he choked it down. His fiancée, however, didn't seem to hear the boy. Her eyes, glittering with unshed tears and a dawning resolution, were fixed on the billionaire. The silence stretched taut and unbearable, broken only by her ragged breathing. Then she spoke, her voice eerily calm. "I think," she said slowly, pulling the magnificent engagement ring from her finger, the diamond catching the light one last painful time, "I need some time and some space." She held it out, not to him, but placed it deliberately on the polished mahogany table between them. A lot of space. The billionaire stared at the ring, then at her, retreating back, as she turned and walked not back into the ballroom, but towards a different private exit from the anteroom, her shoulders straight, her head held high, leaving him alone with the crushing weight of the unseen ink on the papers and the 3 small, unexpected pieces of his past that had just irrevocably gate-crashed his future. The click of the anteroom's private exit, shutting behind Clara, was a sound more final than any gavel. Julian stood frozen, the glittering engagement ring on the mahogany table, a cold, mocking star in the wreckage of his meticulously planned universe. The silence Clara left behind was heavy, suffocating, filled only by the faint, bewildered shuffling of 3 pairs of small sneakers on the plush carpet. His engagement party, the glittering pinnacle of his social year, had imploded. The news would be wildfire by morning, but the society pages were the least of his concerns. He turned slowly to face the triplets, Leo, Sam, and Ben. His sons. The DNA results in his hand were unequivocal, so Julian began, his voice hoarse, the word feeling inadequate for the chasm that had just opened in his life. He gestured vaguely around the opulent anteroom. What? What now? Leo, the buzz-cut boy, ever direct, shrugged. Dunno. Mum just said to find you, and give you the envelope. He looked around. This place is way fancier than our apartment. Do you have video games? Julian blinked. Video games. He had multi-billion-dollar mergers to consider, a global empire to run, and now, apparently, a child wondering about video games. The sheer incongruity of it was jarring. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual composure in tatters. Look, we need to figure things out. His first practical thought was a logistical nightmare. Where would they sleep? What would they eat? Julian Thorne, who could charter a private jet with a single phone call, felt utterly incompetent in the face of 3 small boys. Ben, the serious one who had been watching Julian with an unnerving intensity, spoke up. There's more in the envelope, Mr. Dad. He pointed a small finger at the papers still in Julian's grip. Mum wrote you a letter. A letter. Of course. The DNA results were clinical, but a letter, that would be personal. That would hold the voice of the woman from his past, the woman he had clearly wronged, however unintentionally. He'd been so fixated on the scientific proof he hadn't searched further. With a fresh wave of trepidation, he fumbled through the papers and found it. A few sheets of neatly folded pale blue stationery. He sank into one of the brocade armchairs, the triplets gathering loosely around him, their earlier apprehension now tinged with a childlike curiosity. Sam, the curly-haired one, even leaned lightly against the armrest, peering at the letter. Julian unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, in a way that sent an unexpected pang through him. He began to read. Julian, it started, no bitterness, just a quiet statement of his name. If you are reading this, then the boys have found you. I hope they are safe. I hope they didn't cause too much of a scene. A dry, humorless smile touched Julian's lips at that. There's no easy way to say any of this, and Lord knows I've rehearsed this letter 1,000 times in my head. The letter went on to recount their brief, intense relationship nearly 9 years ago, a whirlwind romance during a period when he'd been more reckless, less guarded. She wrote of her shock at discovering she was pregnant after he'd already moved on, disappearing back into his rarefied world. She wrote of her attempts to reach him, all met with silence. His number changed, his old addresses obsolete. She hadn't known about his burgeoning fame then, his rise to billionaire status. I never wanted to be a burden. Julian, the letter continued, each word a small stab. I made a life for us. A simple one, but filled with love. The boys are wonderful. Leo is brave and impulsive. Sam is my dreamer with a kind heart, and Ben carries the weight of the world on his small shoulders, so observant, so serious. They are your sons, Julian, and they are good boys." Julian had to pause, his vision blurring. He could feel the boy's eyes on him. He cleared his throat and read on. The tone of the letter shifted, a note of urgency, of quiet desperation creeping in. "I'm writing this now because I have to. I've been unwell, Julian. Very unwell. The doctors, they aren't giving me much time. My biggest fear isn't dying. It's leaving my boys alone. They have no one else. You are their only other blood." The room seemed to spin. Unwell. Not much time. The boys' earlier comment about their mother being sick suddenly took on a horrifying new dimension. Sam, as if sensing his distress, patted Julian's arm awkwardly. "Mommy gets tired a lot now," he offered softly. "She sleeps more than she plays." Leo kicked at the leg of the chair. "The doctors are stupid. She'll get better." It was said with the fierce, fragile conviction of a child refusing to accept a terrible truth. Ben just watched Julian, his young face etched with a sorrow that no child should ever have to bear. "She said you were a good man deep down," Ben said quietly. "Even if you made mistakes. She said you'd know what to do. For us." Julian's carefully constructed defenses crumbled. This wasn't a calculated attempt to extort money, nor a malicious act of revenge. This was an act of a dying mother's profound love and desperation, a final desperate plea to the father of her children. The weight of his past irresponsibility, his obliviousness, crashed down on him with crushing force. He had fathered 3 sons, and hadn't even known they existed, while their mother had struggled alone, was now facing her own mortality. The silence in the room was broken by a low rumble. Leo clutched his stomach. "I'm hungry," he announced, as if oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just occurred. "Is there any pizza at this fancy party? Or do rich people only eat tiny food on tiny crackers?" Julian stared at him, then at Sam, who was also looking hopeful at the mention of food, and finally at Ben, who still looked grave, but whose eyes flickered towards his stomach too. They were just children. His children. Hungry. And their mother was... He closed his eyes for a moment, a single hot tear escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He, Julian Thorne, the titan of industry, had no idea how to make 3 boys pizza, let alone how to mend the colossal mess he had made of so many lives. "Right," he said, standing up, the letter clutched in his hand. His legs felt unsteady. "Food? Yes. Let's go find some food." He looked at the boys, a new, terrifying yet undeniable connection thrumming between them. And then he added his voice, filled with a resolve he didn't entirely feel, "We'll figure out everything else." He had no idea where Clara had gone, what she was thinking, or if their meticulously planned future was salvageable. He had no idea how to be a father, especially not to 3 boys who had appeared like a storm. All he knew was that the truth, in all its painful, heartbreaking complexity, had finally been laid bare. And in the tear-filled eyes of a dying woman's letter, and the expectant faces of his newfound sons, lay the undeniable, devastating, and perhaps redemptive start of a new chapter he had never, in his wildest imaginings, anticipated. The grand ballroom, once the scene of his anticipated triumph, now felt like a distant, surreal dream. Julian Thorne, a man accustomed to orchestrating global deals from the comfort of his state-of-the-art penthouse, found himself in the sterile, brightly lit kitchen of that same penthouse, staring blankly at a refrigerator stocked with gourmet charcuterie-aged cheeses and champagne, none of which seemed appropriate for 3 hungry boys under the age of 10. So Leo piped up from the kitchen island, where his Sam and Ben were perched on stools far too tall for them, their legs dangling. About that pizza, Julian sighed a sound that seemed to carry the weight of sleepless nights yet to come. Redemption, he was quickly learning, wasn't going to be a grand gesture, but a series of small, often bewildering skirmishes on unfamiliar battlefields. The first was sustenance. Right. Pizza. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the contact for his personal chef, then paused. No. If he was going to do this, truly, do this, he needed to learn. Or, he said, a new, uncertain idea forming, we could try. Making one, 3 pairs of eyes widened. Sam's held a spark of adventure, Leo's a healthy dose of skepticism, and Ben's a quiet, unreadable curiosity. You know how to make pizza? Dad Sam asked, the word dad still sounding foreign and tentative on his tongue, yet sending an unexpected warmth through Julian. I know how to read instructions, Julian admitted, managing a wry smile. How hard can it be? Famous last words. An hour later, the kitchen looked like a flour and tomato sauce explosion. Julian, his pristine designer shirt dusted white, had dough stuck to his elbows and a bewildered expression. Leo had somehow managed to get tomato sauce in his hair. Sam was meticulously arranging pepperoni into a smiley face on his lopsided pizza base, and Ben, surprisingly, was proving to be a rather adept, if overly serious, cheese grater. The resulting pizzas were misshapen, slightly burnt, and undeniably the best thing Julian had tasted in years. Not for their culinary perfection, but for the chaotic shared laughter that accompanied their creation. Those first few days were a blur of such moments, awkward, frustrating, surprisingly joyful. His immaculate apartment, once a minimalist testament to his wealth and solitude, was steadily being colonized by small toys, sticky handprints, and the infectious, often deafening energy of 3 young boys. His carefully curated schedule of board meetings and power lunches was replaced by school pickup logistics. He had to enroll them, another bewildering journey into bureaucracy bedtime stories. He fell asleep before Leo did, during a particularly dull dinosaur saga, and deciphering the complex emotional landscape of his newfound sons. He learned that Leo needed an outlet for his boundless energy, that Sam was deeply sensitive and retreated into his drawings when overwhelmed, and that Ben, despite his serious demeanor, had a dry wit that surfaced at the most unexpected moments. Once watching Julian struggle to assemble a complex Lego spaceship, Ben had deadpanned, "You can build a skyscraper empire, but you can't follow 6 illustrated steps." Mom was right. You are special. Julian hadn't known whether to laugh or cry. Sleep became a precious, elusive commodity. The weight of their mother's illness, her fading time, pressed heavily on him. He'd made arrangements, of course. The best doctors, a private room, flying in specialists. He spoke to her lawyer, to her sister. He never knew, existed piecing together the quiet, difficult life she'd led while he'd soared. The guilt was a constant companion, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a catalyst. He had to make this right, not just for the boys, but for her, for the memory of the young woman he had so carelessly left behind. He found himself poring over parenting blogs in the dead of night, his usual diet of market reports and financial journals forgotten. He learned to make a passable batch of pancakes, how to expertly remove gum from hair, thanks Leo, and the subtle art of listening, truly listening, to the meandering stories and sudden pronouncements of a 7-year-old. His staff watched the transformation with a mixture of astonishment and discreet amusement. His formidable personal assistant, Miss Albright, a woman who had seen him through corporate takeovers and market crashes, without batting an eye, now found herself sourcing organic juice boxes and scheduling playdates between high-stakes negotiations. The Thorn triplets are certainly recalibrating your portfolio. Mr. Punidopse, oh, Thorne, she'd remarked dryly one afternoon, after finding him on a video call not with a CEO, but with a very insistent Sam, who needed an immediate ruling on whether a dragon could beat a shark in a fight. Clara, meanwhile, remained a distant echo. He'd respected her need for space, sending only a single heartfelt letter of apology, explaining everything about the boy's mother, taking full responsibility, not asking for forgiveness, only understanding. He heard through the grapevine. Society was a small, gossipy pond, that she had left the city staying with her family upstate. He didn't know if she ever thought of him of them. The ring still sat on his bedside table, a constant, painful reminder of what he had lost and what he was desperately trying to build. One Saturday, Julian found himself at a local park, an unfamiliar territory of screeching children and harassed-looking parents. He was attempting to push Sam on a swing, a task proving more rhythmically challenging than anticipated. Leo was scaling a climbing frame with daredevil abandon, and Ben was sitting on a bench, meticulously drawing in a sketchbook, a gift from Julian. He felt a presence beside him, and turned to see a woman with kind eyes and a stroller. "First time on swing duty?" she asked with a knowing smile. Julian chuckled, running a hand through his increasingly untidy hair. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to another parent," she said. "You look like you're trying to launch him into orbit." "Gentler pushes, he'll get the hang of it." They chatted for a few minutes, an easy camaraderie forged in the shared experience of parenthood. It was a simple interaction, yet it resonated with Julian. He was no longer just the billionaire. He was a dad. A fumbling learning often overwhelmed dad. Later that afternoon, as the boys, exhausted and happy, were creating another monumental mess in his living room, with a fort made of sofa cushions and expensive throws, Julian found himself actually smiling. It wasn't the polished smile for the cameras, or the satisfied smile of a deal well made. It was a softer, more genuine expression. This new life was chaotic, exhausting, and utterly terrifying. But amidst the debris of his old certainties, something new was taking root. He looked at Ben's drawing left on the coffee table. It was a surprisingly detailed sketch of the four of them in the park stick figures, with oversized heads, but recognizable. Julian, the tallest stick figure, was even depicted with slightly frazzled hair. Underneath, Ben had written in careful block letters, "My Dad and Us." It was a good day. A wave of emotion, potent and overwhelming, washed over Julian. This, he realized, was the architecture of atonement, not in grand pronouncements, but in these small accumulated moments of shared laughter, clumsy affection, and the quiet, persistent effort to build a bridge across the chasm of his past. The difficult choice wasn't just one choice. It was 1,000 tiny ones made every day to show up, to be present, to learn to love. He picked up the drawing, his fingers tracing the childish script. He still had a long way to go. Clara was a wound that might never fully heal. Their mother's future was a terrifying unknown. But for the first time since that fateful engagement party, Julian Thorne felt a flicker, not of hope, perhaps, but of something akin to it, the tentative, fragile possibility of becoming the man his sons, and their mother, deserved him to be. Months bled into a season, then another. The crisp autumn that had heralded the arrival of the triplets mellowed into the quiet hush of winter, then unfurled into the tentative bloom of spring. Julian Thorne's penthouse, once a monument to stark, solitary ambition, now breathed with a different kind of life. School artwork, vibrant and charmingly imperfect, adorned the refrigerator. The echoing silence had been replaced by the thud of small feet bursts of laughter, and the occasional inevitable squabble over a shared toy. Julian himself was a man remade. The sharp edges of the ruthless billionaire had softened, revealing a patience he never knew he possessed. His days were still demanding, his empire still vast, But its gravity had shifted. He now measured success not just in market shares, but in the genuine smiles of his sons, in the decreasing frequency of Ben's worried frowns, in Leo's boisterous recounting of his day, and in the imaginative worlds Sam spun with his drawings and stories. He learned to braid somewhat clumsily, to decipher the urgent politics of 7-year-old friendships, and to find a profound solace in the simple ritual of tucking 3 small boys into bed. The news about their mother Isabel had come during the bleak midwinter. Julian had ensured she had the best care, sparing no expense, even flying her to a specialist clinic in Switzerland. He and the boys had visited a somber, poignant journey. Isabel, frail but her eyes luminous with love for her children, had looked at Julian with a gaze devoid of bitterness, only a deep maternal gratitude. "Thank you," she'd whispered, her hand light as a feather in his. "They are good with you. They are home." She passed peacefully a few weeks later, a quiet fading as the first snows began to fall. The grief was immense for Julian, as much as for the boys. He held them through their tears, their confusion, their anger, sharing his own sorrow in a way he never thought possible. He told them stories of Isabel, of her courage, her love for them, ensuring her memory was a warm, cherished presence in their lives. In comforting them, he found his own path through the pain, his responsibility as their sole parent, cementing not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. Clara had re-entered his life cautiously, like sunshine after a long storm. She had heard about Isabel, about Julian's quiet, unwavering commitment to his sons. Her initial calls were tentative checking in. Then a coffee-neutral territory, where words were measured, emotions still raw, but no longer accusatory. She saw the change in him, not just in the tired lines around his eyes, but in the depth of his gaze, the newfound gentleness in his demeanor. "You're different," she'd said one afternoon, months later, as they watched the boys attempt to fly a kite in the park, a scene of joyful, wind-swept chaos. Julian was on his knees, untangling string, Leo shouting instructions, Sam offering artistic advice on aerodynamics, and Ben silently ensuring the kite's tail was perfectly aligned. Julian had looked up a smudge of mud on his cheek, his hair endearingly ruffled. "I hope so," he'd replied, his voice quiet. I needed to be. Their journey back to each other was not a rush of grand romantic gestures, but a slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust paved with honest conversations, shared moments of vulnerability, and the undeniable pull of what they once had now tempered and deepened by all that had transpired. Forgiveness, Clara realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about seeing the man Julian had become and choosing to believe in that future. One sun-drenched Saturday morning, nearly a year after the engagement party that had shattered their world, found them all in Julian's kitchen, which was now, more accurately, their kitchen. Pancakes were sizzling on the griddle, a task Julian had almost mastered. Clara was laughing as Leo, with flour dusting his nose, tried to flip a pancake that was decidedly too large for the spatula. Sam was meticulously arranging blueberries into a face on his stack, while Ben read aloud an interesting fact about the migratory patterns of Canadian geese from a nature book. "Dad, your pancake looks like a blob fish," Leo declared with cheerful honesty, pointing at Julian's slightly amorphous creation. Julian feigned offense. "That my little critic is a modern art pancake." Clara chuckled, her eyes meeting Julian's over the boys' heads, a look of shared affection and amusement passing between them. "I think it's a very handsome blob fish, Julian." Ben looked up from his book. "Actually," he said seriously, "blobfish are fascinating creatures adapted to extreme pressure. Perhaps it symbolizes your resilience, Dad." Sam giggled. "Or maybe it's just a really weird pancake." The easy banter, the smell of syrup and coffee, the comfortable chaos. This was the new symphony of their lives. Later that day, while the boys were engrossed in building an elaborate Lego castle in the living room, Julian found Clara on the terrace, looking out over the city. He came to stand beside her, taking her hand. It felt natural, right? I never thought. She began, then paused. I never thought we'd find our way back here. Me neither, Julian confessed. But I'm grateful every day that we did. For them. He nodded towards the sounds of joyful construction from inside. And for us. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. It's not the future we planned. No, Julian agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. It's better. It's real. There was no grand pronouncement, no sudden revelation, just a quiet understanding that had grown between them. The scars of the past remained not as open wounds, but as reminders of the journey they had navigated, the lessons learned. True happiness, they were discovering, wasn't a flawless destination. It was the messy, beautiful, ongoing process of building a life together from the broken pieces, a mosaic held together by love, patience, and the unwavering commitment to the small, extraordinary family they had become. The setting sun cast a warm, golden glow over the city, and for Julian Thorne it illuminated a path forward, filled not with the harsh glare of ambition, but with the gentle, steady light of home, an earned peace, hard-won and deeply cherished. And so Jason and Shaina's journey, once fractured by secrets and the pain of betrayal, finds its way to a new sunlit chapter, a chapter written with the joyful sounds of their children and the quiet, resilient strength of a love painstakingly rebuilt. It truly makes you ponder, doesn't it? How often in life are we offered a genuine opportunity to mend what's broken, to earn back trust? Not through fleeting apologies, but through the consistent, heartfelt effort of a truly changed soul. Their path was a testament that true healing and forgiveness often require immense patience, courage to face past wrongs, and the unwavering commitment to grow. This story, with its unexpected turns and deep emotional currents, resonated profoundly with us. It's a powerful reminder that the most beautiful families, the most enduring bonds, are often forged not in the absence of flaws, but in the fires of adversity, shaped by forgiveness and strengthened by the shared will to heal and rebuild together. What part of Jason and Shaina's challenging, yet ultimately hopeful journey touched you the most? Was it the raw courage of the children? Jason's arduous path to redemption, or Shaina's incredible strength and capacity for forgiveness? We would be so moved to read your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Your perspectives enrich this space, and we are always striving to bring you stories that connect and inspire. If you have any constructive feedback on how we can enhance our storytelling, or perhaps ideas for future narratives you'd like to see, please do share them with us. Your input is invaluable as we aim to grow and improve. If Jason and Shaina's story of second chances and the enduring power of family found a place in your heart, letting us know with a like would mean a great deal. And if you believe this narrative of hope and reconciliation could resonate with someone else, or perhaps offer a moment of comfort or understanding, we encourage you to share it. To continue exploring more journeys of the heart with us, stories that delve into the complexities of human emotion and celebrate the resilience of the spirit, we invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. We believe every story holds a unique light, and we're thrilled to discover them alongside you. Perhaps their journey calls to mind other tales of love, fighting against the odds, or the difficult, beautiful process of rebuilding. You might find similar echoes of strength and hope in the other stories waiting for you on our channel. Thank you for sharing this time with us and for being part of our community. Until our paths cross in the next story, may your own life be filled with moments of profound connection and courageous love.